Thank you, Mitchell, for that very lovely introduction. It is really, truly an honor to receive this award as we celebrate our community's contributions in the legal field. I want to thank SABA, North America, its board, and everyone else who chose to highlight my work tonight. I really do appreciate it. I'm deeply humbled. I'm also deeply humbled because I understand that two very dear friends who are incredible pioneers, who are really kind of stalwarts of our community, Deepa Iyer and Judge Sri Srinivasan, were previous winners, so I'm further humbled by that. I'm sad that I actually missed the chai with Judge Srinivasan. I was hoping that somebody would ask him an embarrassing question, but I understand that did not happen. We'll have to find other opportunities for that, but he is a tremendously inspiring and very dear friend to me, and I'm glad that SABA was able to honor him just a couple of years ago. You know, like many of you in this room, I was the first lawyer in my family. And I was blessed to have parents who supported me in my choices every step of the way, even though many of them went against the grain. They supported me as I followed my heart and embarked on my dream job at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund just after graduating law school. After just a few months as a newly minted lawyer at the Legal Defense Fund, I began looking into a very troubling series of cases in a small town called Tulia, Texas. I'd heard about a drug sting that had culminated in the arrests on July 23rd, 1999, of 46 individuals. 40 were African Americans, 6 were either white or Latino romantic partners of African Americans. And at dawn that day, 12% of Tulia's African American population had been rounded up and jailed on very low-level drug offenses. The local newspaper printed their names and addresses the very next day under a headline that read, "Tulia's streets cleared of garbage." I had very little legal experience to speak of at the time, but I simply couldn't ignore the facts, and so I got on a plane. What I found in Tulia was shocking. An entire community had been targeted and brought down on the word of a single undercover and corrupt officer. His uncorroborated testimony had sent dozens of defendants to prison for sentences ranging from 20 to 361 years on charges that they had sold small amounts of cocaine. Now, I remember going door to door, speaking with residents just to gather information to find out what had happened. And over, I introduced myself. I'm Vanita Gupta from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And over, I was asked the same question. Are you related to CNN's Dr. Sanjay Gupta? Now, for the record, I have never met him. And my husband actually tells me that if you Google me even today, that remains one of the most asked questions about me. Not sure when that will change, but in the fall of 2001, it was Dr. Gupta's name and reputation of the Legal Defense Fund that helped open doors for me in West Texas. Now, it took us 2 long years to bring justice to our clients. But by 2003, we'd shown that the so-called drug sting, which had been hailed as a victory in the war on drugs, had in fact been a grave injustice. As a result of our work, Governor Rick Perry pardoned the Tulia defendants. And 4 years after their ordeal had begun, they were finally free. Now, today I have the incredible honor to continue working on civil rights issues at the Department of Justice. The Civil Rights Division's dedicated career attorneys, professionals, and support staff work tirelessly every day to carry out the mission of protecting civil rights all over the country. We work to protect the most vulnerable among us by ensuring that everyone in America can live free from exploitation, discrimination, and violence. We seek to safeguard the infrastructure of democracy by protecting the right to vote and access to justice. We push for effective and accountable policing and protecting the civil rights of service members. And we work to expand opportunity for all people to learn, to earn a living, to live where they want, to love whom they choose, and to worship freely. Now, on the issue of criminal justice reform, the Civil Rights Division, and indeed the U.S. Department of Justice, has really been at the forefront of reform. From Ferguson to New York and now Baltimore, people have taken to the streets to protest what they view as a lack of police accountability, especially related to the deaths of Black men at the hands of officers. But you know, police officers that I speak to every day, incredibly brave, courageous people, many of whom have really given their lives to public service, feel unfairly attacked, undervalued, and scapegoated for many of society's ills. There's been such a chasm in the conversation on these issues at this time. And this past year's events have highlighted the very urgent need to address distrust, to bridge longstanding divisions between America's law enforcement officers and the communities that they serve. Now, over the last 6 years, the Civil Rights Division has opened 22 investigations into police departments in every corner of the nation, including in Ferguson, where we were exposed to a department that was driven by revenue generation and 2 infected by racial bias. We've reached 17 agreements to correct unconstitutional policing. And these agreements really reflect the input of city officials, of law enforcement leaders, of police unions, and the community. And our agreements, including the very recent and innovative agreement reached in Cleveland, really provide blueprints for transformation for communities that are struggling with these issues all over the country. The Department of Justice is engaged, though, on a whole variety of fronts on civil rights enforcement. We've been fighting to enforce the Voting Rights Act, winning a major victory against Texas's very restrictive voter ID law last year. We've defended the rights of LGBT individuals, arguing that they must be protected by non-discrimination statutes, as well as advocating for marriage equality. We fought for equal housing and equal access to housing and credit, winning over $1.2 billion in monetary relief. And we've ramped up our efforts to end the unnecessary long-term segregation of people with disabilities. Now, there's sometimes a tendency to describe our community as one just of thriving professionals, happily adding to our credentials and building our wealth, the so-called model minority. But the truth is, and we all know it, that we are a very diverse group. And many in our community have struggled with discrimination, isolation, and racial violence. I had a very small window into these experiences when I was a young girl growing up in England. I vividly recall when I was 4 years old, sitting at a fast food restaurant with my mother and sister. We had just picked up my Amma Ji from the airport. She had just arrived from India to visit us, when a group of young men who were part of a skinhead movement at a nearby table started throwing French fries at us. They told us to go home, Pakis, until we finally couldn't bear it anymore and left the restaurant. I was so embarrassed. Many people have endured far, far, far worse, but it really was a formative experience of what it's like to be singled out because of one's skin color and national origin. As with other groups, we see discrimination against Muslims, Arabs, Sikhs, and South Asians in every area of our work at the Civil Rights Division. We have filed suit to defend the rights of Muslims and Sikh subway drivers in New York City to wear religious head coverings for their job. We reached a settlement with a school in Georgia to protect a Sikh student who'd been suffering from a terrible pattern of bullying. In May, we indicted an officer who threw Mr. Suresh B. Patel to the ground, leaving him partially paralyzed less than 2 weeks after he had come to Alabama to visit to help care for his grandchild. But we are also responding to increasing concern about hate crimes, which reverberate far beyond the targeted victim through families, through entire communities in the nation, as people fear that they too could be targeted. Since 2001, we have prosecuted dozens of hate crimes. For example, in 2013, we convicted a Washington state man for beating a Sikh cab driver while making anti-Arab and anti-Muslim statements. In another case, an Indiana man was sentenced to 20 years for breaking into a mosque in Toledo, Ohio, and setting fire to it. These cases and many, many more that we've prosecuted really demonstrate that our community's experiences are very intimately connected to other groups aspiring to the American dream. And so I believe that this legal community, all of you people in this room, must be committed to protecting the civil rights of all people, including those who don't share our ethnic or cultural background. When a Latino person is denied a job on the basis of his or her race, that implicates us. When 6- and 7-year-old black children are arrested for minor discipline infractions in school, fueling a school-to-prison pipeline, that should concern us. When a transgender prisoner is denied important medical treatment because of her gender identity, we should all speak up. These issues and our histories are bound together. Now, if we are to see meaningful, lasting change across the nation in fair housing, equal employment opportunity, and other sectors, the private bar must engage. Tulia is a great example of this. I did not work on that case alone by any stretch of the imagination. I worked day and night, but I worked alongside associates and partners at some of the best law firms in the country who joined us in this fight. Without them, we would not have achieved justice for the people in that town. And the reality is, I am incredibly lucky to be in public service. Although I have days when I fear that I am not doing enough for others or I'm not able to achieve enough as much as I would like, I really never have to question why I do what I do or whether I'm living a meaningful life in accordance with my values. Many of you are public servants yourselves, and you know what I'm talking about. But others of you are involved in pro bono work and know firsthand the meaning that you derive from doing it. For those of you who haven't yet been able to take on an employment discrimination, ADA, prisoners' rights case, I urge you to get involved. The work isn't easy and it's not comfortable, but it's really actually quite healthy to get outside of your comfort zone. Everything I've ever done that has been the most meaningful thing in my life has always taken me out of my comfort zone and challenged me in myriad ways. Never doubt that you can be an agent of change, whether you are toiling as an underpaid, overworked legal aid attorney or scheming to get your pro bono hours up at a law firm. If you care about this work, and you should, my guess is that you're motivated by the same beliefs that I had when I went to West Texas 15 years ago. It's really the belief that every individual has the power to make a profound difference in the lives of others, the power to make change and to bring hope to people who desperately need it, the power to advance the pursuit of justice that has always bound this nation together, and the power to bend the arc of history itself. This kind of change doesn't usually come in broad sweeps. It happens bit by bit, case by case, one after another, one advocacy effort after another, by lawyers like you. Justice doesn't happen because people are keeping their options open and playing it safe. It happens because courageous and committed people make it happen, sometimes against all odds, sometimes against very strong but popular tides. And in the end, justice really isn't some vague and abstract concept. It really has real meaning for real people. In the law, you can be a pioneer in whatever practice you pursue, but what is important is not to limit yourself by always opting for the path of least resistance and by other people's expectations of you. And so I really want to thank you tonight for choosing to give me this award. I stand on the shoulders of giants. I've had many people who've mentored me along the way and who continue to mentor me. I want to also recognize my husband, who's here tonight, for his amazing support of my work and for his own commitment to justice as a legal aid director in DC. I am really blessed in so many ways to love what I do and to be infected by a deep reservoir of hope and optimism. Hope is an essential ingredient for justice. It is what fuels you when problems seem too big or too intractable. So may we rise to the challenge and overcome the divisions of our time. Let us signal to the world that as South Asian lawyers and beyond, that in America today, the pursuit of a more perfect union lives on. Thank you very much.